Kathryn Bigelow is, of course, an award-winning feature film director. I think she was the first female to win the Best Director Oscar, which is extraordinary when you think about it, for The Hurt Locker, I think. But back in 1987, she dabbled in the horror genre with a film called Near Dark, which I've never seen before, but I've seen it now. Welcome back to my world of stuff. My name would appear to be Paul Mount. Strangely, it's Halloween season, and as I mentioned on the community tag, I'm doing a few videos for the season. I'm sorry, for me Halloween is one night at the end of October. I can't get through this Halloween season, the holiday and all that sort of stuff. I think that's a very American thing, but people do buy into it, so what the hell, no harm's done. I put out a little call for a couple of extra films to watch as part of my recognition of Halloween. I've got a couple of bits and pieces. I've already done Ghost Watch, the 1992 BBC classic, which came up a couple of days ago. I've got The Night of the Living Dead to come later this week. I put out a community request for additional titles. I had a few interesting suggestions, and in fact I will get round to all of them at some point. But the winners of the suggestions are Near Dark, which was suggested by, thank you sir, and Blood on Satan's Claw, which was suggested by, and that'll be coming up later this week. But today it's Near Dark, 1987 Western biker vampire film directed by Kathryn Bigelow, which I said I'd never seen before. And it was in my collection, and I thought, well, yeah, let's have a look at that. And I found it thoroughly enjoyable. It's an interesting film. It didn't do well at the box office because it came out more or less around about the same time as The Lost Boys, starring Kiefer Sutherland, which sort of captured the zeitgeist a lot more than Near Dark. And I think possibly Near Dark, being sort of western-y, probably not part of the diet of people's cinema at that time. So it sort of sailed under the radar, didn't make its money back, which is a shame. It has become a cult classic, and I can absolutely see why, because it is a very good, very unusual, very moody and atmospheric film. It stars Adrian Pasdar as Caleb Colton. When we meet him at the beginning of the film, he's this sort of chancer cowboy type character who meets up with a girl called Mai at a bar. He's eating an ice cream at the time, and he takes a fancy to her, and he gives her a ride in his truck, and he takes her out and about. He makes a pass at her. She rebuffs him, but there's something a bit strange about her. She's unknowable, she's unreadable, she's different. As the night wears on, they spend time together, sort of flirting and enjoying each other's company, and suddenly she realises that it's very nearly dawn, and she's very anxious to get back home. He gives her a lift home. She's desperate to get home as quickly as possible before the sun rises, but he stops on the way and says that he won't carry on to giving her a lift home, so she gives him a great big kiss, which she does. She also takes a big chunk out of his neck, then she runs off. This all happens rather quickly, and he starts running after her across the desert, and suddenly he starts to smoke. He starts to sort of burn up. It turns out, of course, that he's been turned and he's become a vampire, and that May is in fact part of a group of vampires led by Lance Henriksen's Jesse Hooker. Caleb, of course, can't understand what's happening to him. He feels terribly ill. He just wants to get home. He can't get home. Then May takes him under a wing to meet the others, and they are reluctant to allow him to enter their little group of vampires, but they give him a chance to prove himself by learning how to hunt and kill, which he starts to do, and he starts to become part of the group. The group includes Bill Paxton's vicious Severin, and Janet Goldstein as Diamondback, and they're a sort of a biker gang, if you like. They're sort of all dressed in leather, and they travel across the country. When we meet them, they're in this sort of RV with blacked out windows, and obviously Near Dark, the title, is a reference to the main sort of vampiric element of the film, that they have to stay out of the light, otherwise they will burn up. And this is what we see as the danger that manifests itself to the vampires throughout the film. When they are subjected to sunlight, they get these moments where they get burnt and they jump back from the sun. Caleb is sort of settling into the group, but his father and his young sister have been looking for him because he's gone missing, and as chance would have it, they pitch up at the same motel where the vampire group are holed up for the night. This forces Caleb to confront his loyalties, when his father and sister are a threat, he turns against the vampire and they rush back home. Caleb's back with the family. It's hard to comment on an element of a film about vampires with strange credibility, but at this point, Caleb asks his father to do a complete blood transfusion on him, effectively taking all his blood away, replacing his blood with fresh blood. This cures his vampirism. He's now human again. I don't know how likely it is that a fairly sort of hick farmer in a barn would have the ability and knowledge to give a complete blood transfusion to somebody, but hey, go with it for the purposes of the story. He's back with the family, but the vampires won't give up. They want him back. They want to kill him off. He reunites with May. Then he has a final confrontation with Jesse and Severin, and that's all I can say about the film if you've not seen it. It's an excellent film. I mean, it's of its time. It does feel like an 80s film. It's got that sort of music and sort of look about it. It looks like an 80s film. But it's very atmospheric. It does meld those two elements together, the Western and the vampire film. They work quite well together. And even though it's not a Western in the traditional sort of cowboys and Indians, men on horseback sense, it has that visual look and it has that landscape behind it. It has that setting of that sort of laid back Midwestern sort of feel to it. It's an interesting entry into the vampire oeuvre because, as I said, it doesn't bother with any of the other vampire cliches. There's nothing to do with garlic and religion and crosses and water and being invited across the threshold. This is basically about vampires who keep out of the light, near dark. They have to live in near dark. That's what it's all about. You haven't got to worry about all the other ephemeral vampire myth. And they are vicious, savage creatures as well. I mean, I do like to see a film where vampires are monsters rather than love interests and romantic, gothic, haunted figures. Vampires are, at the end of the day, blood-sucking monsters. Or at least they would be if they existed, of course. And in cinema, I think you portray them as monsters. That's when you get the most out of them. Think of Christopher Lee's vicious Dracula. Think of the vampires of 30 Days of Night, which is a very underrated horror classic, which I will be revisiting at some point quite soon. And I think that's what we want to see vampires like. We want to see them as savage creatures of the night. And that comes across this way. They've got the trappings of civilization. They drive and they eat. They don't have any of that sort of stuff that we have with vampires, not being able to eat and all that sort of thing. And there is a very striking, very strong scene when they go to a bar and proceed to very bloodily slaughter everybody in the bar. That's a very well done scene. And that is the closest the film comes, I think, to being horrific. Because it isn't necessarily a horror film. It's got, obviously it's about vampires and it's got horrific stuff going on, but it doesn't, because of the modern contemporary setting and that Western vibe, it doesn't feel horrific. I think there is something about horror that works particularly when a Gothic setting, and if you put horrific things in a contemporary modern setting, it can work. But I think vampires in this setting, for some reason, doesn't seem particularly horrific. You're aware of the horror of them and the horror of what they do, but the film itself doesn't horrify. At least it doesn't horrify me, because as I said before, I've got quite a strong stomach with this stuff. But I really enjoyed watching this. It's a very well made film. I think I would agree with one criticism that said that perhaps the direction is more focused on some of the artistic shots than perhaps character beats and the performances. I mean, there's nothing wrong with any of the performances, but I think Kathryn Bigelow set out here to show what she could do as a director. So it has some very startling imagery, which looks fantastic. But I think there are times where perhaps that takes precedence over moving the story along and keeping the beats of the story and the characters front and centre. Small criticism, really. It's a really good film, a very, very strong calling card. It's a shame that she never did any more, or has not yet done any more genre films, because I think she has an eye for it. But I think she certainly made a very specific statement here in terms of vampires, in a film that has, over the years and over the decades, grown in stature and grown in reputation. And I think is now regarded as a bit of a sort of a modern vampire classic. It's highly recommended, and I'm glad I've finally seen it. I'm going to give Near Dark big 8 out of 10. It's available on Blu-ray. I think it's on 4K, I'm not sure. I'm sure it's on a streaming service somewhere. You'd need to find that out for yourself. Right, thank you for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've seen Near Dark, leave a comment down below. Tell me what you thought of it. If you're tempted to watch it now, let me know what you thought of it. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, do all that sort of usual caper. I'll see you soon for some more stuff later this week. Until I do, keep taking the stuff.